Our lesson today is about revenue recognition with some emphasis on IFRS 15. Revenue recognition. The revenue recognition principle is the concept of how the revenue should be recognized in the entity's financial statements. The revenue recognition could be different from one accounting principle to another principle and one standard to another standard. For example, based on a cash basis or cash accounting principle, revenue is recognized in the financial statements at the time cash is received. However, accrue accounting principles, the revenue are recognized when the transaction has occurred. What are the conditions for revenue recognition? According to the IFRS criteria, for revenue to be recognized, the following conditions must be satisfied. 1. Risk and rewards of ownership have been transferred from the seller to the buyer. 2. The seller does not have control any longer over the goods sold. 3. The collection of payment from goods or services is reasonably assured. 4. The amount of revenue can be reasonably measured. 5. Cost of revenue can be reasonably measured. Conditions 1 and 2 are referred to as performance. Regarding performance, it occurs when the seller has done what is to be expected to be entitled to payment. Condition 3 is referred to as collectibility. The seller must have a reasonable expectation that he or she will be paid for the performance. Conditions 4 and 5 are referred to as measurability. Due to the accounting guideline of the matching principle, the seller must be able to match the revenues to the expenses. Hence, both revenues and expenses should be able to be reasonably measured. Revenue recognition from contracts. IFRS 15, revenue from contracts with customers, establishes the specific steps for revenue recognition. It is important to note that there are some exclusions from IFRS 15, such as the following. 1. Lease contracts, which is under IAS 17. 2. Insurance contracts, which is under IFRS 4. And 3. Financial instruments, which is under IFRS 9. Now we go to the steps in revenue recognition from contracts. The steps are the following. 1. Identifying the contract. 2. Identifying the performance obligations. 3. Determining the transaction price. 4. Allocating the transaction price to the performance obligations. And 5. Recognizing revenue in accordance with performance. Now we go to the first step, identifying the contract. All conditions must be satisfied for a contract to form. 1. Both parties must have approved the contract, whether it be written, verbal, or implied. 2. The point of transfer of goods and services can be identified. 3. Payment terms are identified. 4. The contract has commercial substance. And 5. The collection of payment is probable. Now we go to the second step, identifying the performance obligations. Some contracts may involve more than one performance obligation. For example, the sale of a car with a complimentary driving lesson would be considered as two performance obligations, the first being the car itself and the second being the driving lesson. Performance obligations must be distinct from each other. The following conditions must be satisfied for a good or service to be distinct. 1. The buyer can benefit from the goods or services on its own. And 2. The good or service is separately identified with a contract.